Welcome to Media and Monuments, presented by Women in Film and Video in Washington, D.C. Media and Monuments features conversations with industry professionals speaking on a range of topics of interest to screen-based media makers.
Rating a movie thumbs up or thumbs down is synonymous with Siskel and Ebert. Now a new book explains how it all started, their relationship on and off the balcony, and the cultural impact they had on all of us. I'm your host, Sandra Abrams, and in this episode, I have a conversation with Matt Singer about his book, Opposable Thumbs, How Siskel and Ebert Changed Movies Forever. But first, a little bit about Matt Singer. He is the editor and film critic of ScreenCrush.com and a member of the New York Film Critics Circle. He won a Webby Award for his work on the independent film channel's website, ifc.com, and is the author of another book, Marvel's Spider-Man, From Amazing to Spectacular. He lives in Brooklyn with his wife and 2 daughters, and he likes to bake, so we'll ask him about that as well.
Okay, sure.
Congratulations on the book, and welcome to Women in Film and Video's podcast. Thank you, Matt Singer, for being here.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Happy to be here. Happy to talk about books or baking, whatever suits your mood.
Well, I read in the acknowledgments, your wife was the one that said, you have to write about Siskel and Ebert. So why was it so important to tell their story?
According to her, it was important to tell the story because she knows me so well and knows that if I hadn't written it, that someday if someone else wrote the book instead of me, and I had passed on the opportunity, that I would have been miserable and spiteful about it for the rest of my life. And she was probably right about that. I fully give her credit for basically talking me into it when I was feeling a little self-conscious or nervous. Basically just because I grew up a huge Siskel and Ebert fan. It is the reason that I became interested in movies and movie criticism and wanted to be a film critic and all those sorts of things. And so when I was talking to my literary agent about doing a book and kind of pitching ideas, and I was, I had sort of like a list of all these potential topics that I would maybe want to do a book about. And when I showed it to my wife before sending it to the agent, she was the one who was like, how come Siskel and Ebert isn't on here? Because she knows me and knows that I was a huge fan of the show, and that would be a good topic. And, I was like, I would want to do it, but I was also, what if I screw it up? Because to me, it is such a big deal. And it's a big responsibility, at least in my mind, to do, hopefully the book about these guys. And so that's what I said. I was like, I don't know. What if I can't do it? What if I'm not up to the task? And she's like, first of all, get over yourself. You can do it. You're fishing for compliments. You can, I know you can do it. And then but she also said, like, if you don't do it and someone else does, you are going to be pissed off about it forever. And I recognized immediately that, yes, she is right. So that was it. That was how the spite inspired this book. Love and spite, I sometimes say, were the 2 central inspirations for. There it is.
Now here it is. Here's it. As you know, you went through it and you came through on the other side, and this is the end result right here. So, so they had a huge influence on your life. But if you were to, say which one of these 2, Chicago critics, would you say are you most identify with? And whether it's personality or it's movie taste.
I don't know. I'm not sure if I identify with one or the other in terms of taste. That's sort of an interesting question that I don't know that anyone's ever asked me. I mean, in terms of personal influence, for sure, Roger Ebert was the bigger influence just because, Gene Siskel passed away so young when I was, 1999. I was still in college, studying film at that point, a little bit at that point already. And so, Roger had this amazing sort of, I don't know if you would call it a second act, a third act, that was sort of the later years when he was hosting the show with Richard Roper. And then even after he had health problems, he had this whole additional life as a blogger and a writer and a thinker, not just about movies, but he was writing so beautifully about all these different topics, his own life and spirituality and politics and all kinds of random things. And he just sort of, he was much more present for so much more of my life. But I will say, having said that, doing the research for the book and rewatching and watching so many episodes of the old show, it really made me sort of reappreciate Gene Siskel, who, again, like, I watched the show obsessively as a kid, but unfortunately I wish there were, but there aren't like books of Gene's writing. Unless you really go digging into the archives of the Chicago Tribune, it's not easy to find his written criticism. So, he's not someone that I really studied per se, the way I had studied Roger Ebert, and like I have a whole shelf of Roger Ebert books in my house. But again, watching the show for the book, like I guess you could say I fell in love with Gene Siskel in a really intense way. I really enjoyed watching the show in general, but like I said, I already really revered Roger a lot, and so doing the research for the book was a great way to I really fall back in love with Gene. I really loved what he brought to the show. The show would not have worked with just one without the other. The mix of ingredients that they brought together was really made it special.
Well, speaking of mix of ingredients and the stories that you got, I wanted to ask you about how you got people to share some of these stories. And there's a treasure trove of them in the book. But I just wanted to highlight a few that I just love. There was so Gene Siskel, he had his pet peeve. He didn't like people talking during the movie. So apparently he became a movie usher. And he had the flashlight, and then apparently he wanted to kick someone out, but instead they kicked out Siskel. So I thought that was great. And then the other one was Roger Ebert. He didn't study out to be a film person. He just by happenstance and serendipity got this job over at the Sun-Times. And I read there was $2.90. He went to learn about movies, so he went to the movies, and the movie ticket was $2.95, but then he also got a 3-course meal at the Chinese restaurant next door. And so I just, and then you had stories from Siskel's assistant, and she talked about what a great procrastinator he was. So how did you get people to open up and share these stories with you?
To some extent, the people really, really love telling these stories. Like, it's not too hard if you can get in touch with these people. At least it wasn't for me, because the people who worked on this show really, they all seem to kind of share this sort of love of that time and love of working on the show and love of Gene and Roger. And yes, these guys could be kind of cantankerous, and they definitely gave each other a lot of grief, and they were hard on each other. And that was part of the sort of magic of their appeal, or their rapport, I guess you could say. But they don't seem like they were bad bosses. It seems like the people who worked for them really seemed to love working for them and loved working with them. And so, yeah, they were, the hard part was sometimes finding them, but generally people who I found were very receptive to talking to me. I guess the other thing that did help is years ago, after Gene had passed away and Roger had lost the ability to speak, I had auditioned for one version of the show that was sort of the later years of the show, that was called At the Movies, that, if you remember, was hosted. Eventually it was hosted by Ben Lyons and Ben Mankiewicz, was the first iteration like this. And I had auditioned for a role on the show, and doing that I had met a bunch of the people who had worked on the show for a long time, including people like Don Dupree, who was the director of the show for a long time, and David Plummer, who was a producer of the show for a long time. And, just getting to go to the balcony set and meet these guys was a thrill of a lifetime. Because again, I was a huge fan as a kid of the show, and so like, when I'm showing up for these auditions, I guess I'm obviously I want to do well, but I'm like most excited about just talking to these people. I'll be like, you're Don Dupree. I know your name from the credit. You were the director of Siskel and Ebert. And so any chance I got, I would ask, what was it like working with them? And I would tell, and so I think essentially that, these guys knew me, and obviously I wasn't the host of that show, but I had sort of, I guess you could say like a recurring role or a contributing critic role where I was part of this one segment where they would have critics from around the country kind of, now to basically do what we're doing now. I had to go to a television studio to do this back in the day because Zoom or Riverside or whatever didn't exist, but it was the same idea. And it was basically like a roundtable discussion remotely about movies. And so I kept in touch with those guys, and I think they understood that if I said I'm doing a book about Siskel and Ebert, they knew, okay, well, this guy is a true fan. He's really doing it because he loves this show and he loves Ebert and Siskel, and he really wants to, he's coming at it from a sincere place of love. And so I think that probably helped as well, sort of with those first couple of interviews. And then I would ask people I spoke to, who else should I talk to? And so I was able to kind of connect to people that way as well. And so, that was sort of how I was able to track down the first people. And then that kind of got the snowball rolling down the hill, as it were.
Well, as speaking of the show Ebert presents at the movies, do you think if there was a future version that could be successful? What involvement, if any, would Roger Ebert's wife have in that, do you think?
Well, this is a big question, is like, and it is something I've thought a lot about, and certainly during the writing of the book thought a lot about, is like, this show, Siskel and Ebert, had different names. It had different homes for basically a quarter of a century. It was this huge kind of presence in the world of film and film criticism. And then, it had these sort of alternate iterations after Gene dies, after Roger gets ill. And it survives basically until that last version, which was Ebert Presents at the Movies, which was on PBS, I think. Either
you were a segment contributor to that one. To that,
I was also
version, right?
I was also I also did a few segments for that show as well, and was able to meet Chaz Ebert and Roger as well doing that, and which was a real thrill. So, and I guess that went off the air about 15 years ago now, 14, 15 years ago, and since then there hasn't really been anything that's fully filled the void. And it's like, well, why isn't that there? And there's a lot of, we could do a 2-hour podcast just on that question. Do I think that there could be a show like that again? Absolutely, yes. I think finding the right hosts would be key. Whether Chaz would want to be involved, I certainly think her presence could only help because, of her own film knowledge, and producing knowledge and experience, and obviously, all of the things she's done. But to me, it's like really what it comes down to is, Gene and Roger together really were the lightning in the bottle, and so it's not, that doesn't happen too often. So it becomes a question of who could it be, who could do it. And a lot of people have tried, and it's never quite lived up to the legacy of what they built. So do I think it could happen again? Absolutely. Do I think it will happen again? Maybe, maybe not. And again, we could talk for hours about why or why not it might be. It's sort of interesting to think about. But I do think that either way, the model of Siskel and Ebert is certainly with us in the form of cable news shows, sports talk shows. They all kind of have that same energy. And even, podcasts like this, people talking, if you want to hear people talking about the movies, you can find that. It's just not going to be on, your basic cable or syndicated or on PBS, but you can find it on podcasts, on YouTube, maybe on other places as well.
Well, speaking of people today and the movies, we're in this, Rotten, you in the book compare Rotten Tomatoes, their certified fresh movies, distinction, to the new two thumbs up. That sounds like high praise for them.
Well, it depends on who you're talking to. I mean, some people back in their day, they, despised the thumbs. And this is definitely something that's talked about in the book, too, is sort of how the thumbs, two thumbs up, and all of that was created and whether it was good or bad and the legacy of those sorts of things. And it's kind of a big topic. And yeah, I think that absolutely nobody, I don't think there's anybody out there today that has sort of replaced the stature, the authority, the name recognition of a Siskel and Ebert. But I think all you need to do is look at, if you still have a newspaper in your town, look at the newspaper in your town and look at the Friday art section and see what movies ads are there and what do you see. Probably you're going to see something, if they have good reviews, you're going to see something about a Rotten Tomatoes percentage or certified fresh, which means that it's gotten a very high percentage. And that has sort of, if anything, has come close to replacing two thumbs up in at least in sort of the nomenclature of cinephilia and movie marketing, I suppose. It would be certified fresh. Doesn't have quite the same ring as two thumbs up, but I think a lot of people, even, sort of more general movie lovers who aren't crazy about movies, they've come to know what Rotten Tomatoes is and know what something that's fresh on Rotten Tomatoes means. So, yeah, I mean, is that the successor or the replacement to that? Yeah, I think in a lot of ways it is. Is it a good or a bad thing? Just like with the thumbs, I think it's a very complicated subject. I mean, I think if you're looking at Rotten Tomatoes only to get a number and letting a number decide whether you go see a movie or not, I mean, personally, that's not how I would choose to make my movie-going decisions. But, Rotten Tomatoes as a website is still a useful website, because, it was created to be a place where you could quickly find links to movie reviews. And it still can do that for you. If you spend more than 10 seconds glancing at a number, you can find hundreds of reviews there. And so all you have to do is actually click on the links and go read the reviews. And, maybe that's a better way to decide whether you might want to see a movie or not, or just a better way to engage with film criticism, clicking the links and actually reading some of the reviews that some, the very talented critics who are still around and still working are kind of engaging with movies that way. Now, do I think most people use Rotten Tomatoes that way? Maybe not. Would I like it if they did? Yeah, absolutely. And I would encourage people, instead of just looking at that number, to go and seek out the actual reviews. And back in their day, Gene and Roger would say the same thing. They defended the thumbs, but they would also say, if you see those thumbs, we're hoping that when you see two thumbs up in a movie ad, to us, it's not just advertising the movie, it's advertising our show. And we hope you will come and watch the show and you will see that the thumbs are a small part of the show. And that's the last 2 minutes. And the rest of the half hour is us debating the movies and critiquing them and arguing and praising and talking. And so, as with a lot of these things, it's a complicated subject, and there's pluses and there are minuses. There's thumbs up and thumbs down, I suppose you could say, to all of these things.
Well, speaking of their show, I was surprised to learn that there's no official archive of Siskel and Ebert's reviews. So were you watching hours and hours of, old TV reviews? Like, how did you go about finding the archival footage? And, what was it that your search, did you go to Chicago? Were you at the Museum of Broadcasting in New York? Like, how did that?
All of the above, actually, as a matter of fact. I did go to Chicago, and I did watch some stuff in Chicago, and I also went to the Paley Center here in New York City to watch some things. There was a few things there that I couldn't find elsewhere. And then it was a lot of, looking at stuff online. There's a vast kind of library, fan archived library online. You can find a lot of stuff on YouTube. There's also a website that's just siskelebert.org. I don't know to this day who has created and maintained this site, but God bless them, because they have a very extensive collection of reviews and other kind of arcane appearances on other shows. Now, there is overlap there. Like a lot of their stuff is also on YouTube, but there's certain things that were on YouTube that weren't on that site. There were certain things on that site that weren't on YouTube. So it was really just a matter of doing my best to find everything I possibly could and watching as much of it as I could. And it wasn't, at least as I was writing, it seemed at times that people were uploading things as I was working. There would be things that I would look for and I couldn't find. And then I would come back a few months later and lo and behold, there they were. But the vast majority of stuff was available. There was certain episodes that either were incomplete because maybe the person who taped it only taped the first half or taped over the other half. Who knows?
Oh, taped over something. Oh my God.
Can you imagine? I mean, that's literally the technology we're talking about here. It's that these, people, these are not master tapes. In some cases there are, but a lot of cases it's not. It's somebody was a hardcore Siskel and Ebert fan like me, and they would, meticulously copy the shows off of PBS or off of WGN or whatever it was that they were watching. And thankfully they held on to them. And then years later, they were uploading them to YouTube. So if people do want to watch, if there's a review you want to find, if you go on to YouTube and type in the name of the movie in Siskel and Ebert, if it's between 1975 and 1999, there's a pretty good chance it will be up there.
So what do you think about the movie version of your book? When do you think that will be happening? And who would play Gene and who would play Roger?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I don't know. Would it make a good movie? Would it make a good TV show? I don't know. I'm not a maker of those things generally. I guess I'm a bookmaker, I suppose, but I don't know. Casting them is a tall order to me. I mean, I would certainly love to see it, but who could play them? I don't know. I remember a few years ago, there was some sort of project that I remember I don't know if it was officially announced, it was rumored. There was some sort of project that I always thought sounded amazing that was, it was like Roger Ebert's adventures in Hollywood with Russ Meyer, because Roger Ebert wrote Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. And I could be and I could be mistaken.
And Gene Siskel actually wrote a bad review in the Chicago Tribune about that, from what I understand.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Yes, he wrote not just a bad review. He wrote a 0-star review, about as mean as it gets. Yes, I found that. You can find that on the Chicago Tribune. I don't know if I found that on their website or if I had to dig a little, but yes, that I did. Yes, that was his review. This is before they were working together. They were already sort of rivals in Chicago, but this was before they started working together. But just imagine you write a movie and then a few years later, and this guy who you don't like, you might not talk to him, but this person, he writes this scathing review of your movie, blames you, maybe not by name, but sort of says, I can't imagine why Russ Meyer would have saddled himself with this neophyte screenwriter, meaning Roger Ebert. Just imagine if that guy who wrote that, then a few years later they say, would you want to do a TV show with this guy? Just think about how you would feel. And then you get a little sense of why these guys maybe didn't always get along. But yes, that did happen. But yeah, there was a project like that. I remember them talking about it. I don't remember who was supposed to direct it, but I always thought that would have been, I was so excited when I heard about that project, and I don't even really know why it fell apart, but I thought that would have made a stupendous movie. I would have loved to have seen that. Maybe someday they'll make it. I don't know.
Well, you also narrate the audiobook. Can you tell us a little bit more? What was that process like? And did you consider incorporating sound bites from Siskel and Ebert or any other quotes from interviewees into your audiobook?
I'm not sure if that, this was the first time I've done an audiobook. I'm not sure if that's, I guess, I've listened to audiobooks.
Right.
I'm not sure if that's if that option was allowed, it wasn't presented to me. That would have been cool, I guess, but maybe there's a legal issue of, using clips from the episodes without permission. Maybe that would have been not allowed. But yes, I did narrate it. I wanted to do it. I thought it would be fun. I mean, I had listened to audiobooks, and I don't know, when I listen to audiobooks, I often find I like them much more when the author reads it themselves. Sometimes no disrespect to professional, audiobook readers, but sometimes they just seem a little, I don't know, phony, insincere. You could really tell when an author is reading it, because maybe they're not as polished and they don't have that great voice that so many of those audiobook people have. But but it was written in their voice, and they know what they intended to say, and they can speak with a certain level of authority and passion. And so I've found that sometimes, maybe not always, but a lot of times when the author reads it themselves, I don't know, I just enjoy it more myself. And so that was why I sort of, when the publisher came to me about it, I was like, if you'll let me do it, I want to do it. I think it would be really interesting. And it was a very interesting experience. It was fun. It was hard. It was long. It was, to record. I think the final book is like 9 hours and maybe 20 minutes or something. And it was multiple weekends, all day sessions in the studio, just reading the book. So yeah, it's kind of an endurance test. It's a little grueling, on your throat, because after, 2 days of 8 straight hours reading, you start, it's a real workout for the voice box. But I was very happy I did it. And I haven't listened to I have listened to a little of it. I don't know, something about listening to my own voice. I don't know. I don't know that I could do that for 9.5 hours, but I'm glad I did it. And if listening to this podcast, you think, wow, listen to that incredible voice, I would love to hear 8.5 more hours that sound just like this. Well, you can, because the audiobook is out there, and I did it.
And there were some very touching moments in the book. Did you find that you were getting emotional when you read through those parts because they have been such a big influence on your life?
Honestly, yes. Actually, and people have asked, was it hard writing? Because Opposable Thumbs and the story of Siskel and Ebert, generally it's a fun story, and it's got a lot of, humor, and, like Roger Ebert writes Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, and Gene Siskel writes the most merciless 0-star review of it imaginable.
It's
and this
all
is
in
before
here,
they've
people.
ever
Get the book. It's all in here.
And it's before they've ever worked together for a single episode. Like, you couldn't make up stuff like that. It's just so beautiful and funny and poetic, and most of the story is like that. And then at the end, it's not like that. It's really sad because, Gene's life was so short, like just kind of horribly short. And he died of this horrible illness. And before long after that, Roger got ill. And, it wasn't easy writing it, but I don't know. But honestly, the reading of the audiobook, yes, it was kind of emotional and heavy. Those chapters were very difficult to get through. Like, I really loved reading the stuff about Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, and that was fun. And then, yeah, it was tough because you want to read it with the appropriate level of seriousness, but you also, you can't be, breaking up and breaking down on the microphone as well. So it was tough. There was definitely some moments where I was like, can we take a 5-minute break here? And I had to sort of pause because, it's heavy stuff. So yeah, that was not, that part of the book was definitely my least favorite to read, let's say. And certainly the most difficult to read as well. That was not a fun part of the overall process, which otherwise was a lot of fun.
Well, let's talk about a little bit of current state. You're the current chair of the New York Film Critics Circle. What's the hot topic that's everybody's debating?
I feel like the hot topic in movies these days, and it has been this way for the last few years, is sort of just the state of movies in a world of streaming, and in a world where it's kind of gone back a little bit to the way things were before the pandemic, but in a world where the sort of the dividing line between the movie theater and home, which for so long was that was like a brick wall. It was impermeable. As the pandemic happened, and it was even before the pandemic, it was sort of starting to get a little more, a little more opaque. With Netflix making their own movies and all these streamers, the pandemic really seemed to accelerate that. And, for a while, people are talking, this is the end of movie theaters and things like that. And I think what we're seeing, in the last year or 18 months is that doesn't really seem to be the case. There are, people are still going to the movie theaters when the movies are good, when there's things that they want to see. But I think that's still what people are talking about is are these services good for movies? Are they bad for movies? Are they going to end up destroying movie theaters? Are movie theaters going to survive? Are the movies that are being made for these streaming services any good? Why are so many of them so crummy? And also, kind of an extension of that, there's so much stuff to watch now in theaters, on streaming, on cable, on broadcast, on the internet, on YouTube. There's so much stuff that it becomes a question of like, what do I watch and how do I find time to watch all the things that I want to watch? And, that's kind of one place where critics can absolutely still come in and play an important role. Maybe there's not as many of them making a full-time living doing that as there used to be in the days of Siskel and Ebert, which is kind of unfortunate, said the guy who tries to make a living doing this. But I mean, if you want to find people talking about these things, though, there's certainly, no end to the number of critics you could read, watch, listen to on podcasts, if you're willing to go out there and find them.
Well, when it comes to movies, you're watching or screen-based media, you're watching many things, but do you have a favorite genre that you in particular? I'm
omni-genre-rational. I don't know. Is that a word I could make up on the spot? I'm not really, I'm not really in favor of or opposed to any genre. I love a good romantic comedy. I love a good science fiction movie. I love a good drama. I love a good baseball movie. I love a good car chase movie. I love a good, beautiful, ponderous art film if it's done well. And honestly, I do think a little of that I kind of attribute to Siskel and Ebert and watching this show from an early age, where you would be introduced to a lot of different kinds of movies. It wasn't like they only reviewed the big movie of the week. They would talk about documentaries and art house films and foreign films. And if you hadn't seen a classic movie that they were talking about, they didn't make you feel like a dummy because you didn't know the rules of the game or 8.5 or Breathless or whatever the movie might be. If they were talking about it being, new on home video, the home video pick of the week was a regular feature on the show for years. They always kind of made me go, oh, that sounds interesting. They had this way of making you want to discover and watch whatever they were talking about. So I don't know. That's always sort of the way that I've kind of felt. I mean, I guess if I was, pressed, I might say I love a good action movie. But I wouldn't say that there's, a genre. I'm trying to think of like one genre that I go, oh, I don't like that kind of movie. But I'm hard pressed to think of one. I would love actually to be able to say like, oh, what I hate is X. But I'm not. Nothing's coming to mind. I mean, if you tell me, oh, you should see this movie, it's good. It kind of doesn't matter what it's about to me. If it's good, it's good. That's what's amazing about movies. They can be anything. They can look like anything. They can be 70 minutes long, or they can be 4.5 hours. They can be fictional or non-fictional. They can be 100 years old, or they could have been made last week. I love movies. They're the best. They're great.
I get that impression in talking to you. Definitely, you love the movies. Well, speaking, not picking your favorite genre, that's fine. Okay, we'll ask you to pick something else.
What
So
a
when you were
cop out.
doing,
Sorry, I copped out.
So in doing your research, did you visit in Chicago? Did you visit Garrett's on Rudolph Street? It was around the corner from the Chicago Theater, which was Gene Siskel's favorite popcorn shop. And then speaking of popcorn, is it popcorn or no popcorn for you?
Okay, so when I was in Chicago, I walked past a lot of those popcorn places because they're kind of a chain. I didn't go in, but recently my wife and daughter took a trip to Chicago without me. It was my daughter's birthday, and instead of a birthday party, she really wanted to go see Sue the dinosaur at the Field Museum. They have this, like, the world's most complete T-Rex. And so she didn't have a birthday party this year. She went to see Sue. And they went and got popcorn at, I don't know if it was that exact one, but they got the popcorn. And they did say it was great. I love popcorn. I'm not supposed to eat it because it can upset. I'm like a old lady. Like, my grandmother had the same digestive issues that I have now I've had them since I was 22. It's pretty embarrassing, but I'll be honest, I don't care. And I'm supposed to avoid, to preserve my very touchy digestive system, I'm supposed to avoid nuts and seeds. And sadly, that includes popcorn. It's corn. I wouldn't know why, but I guess it's the husks or whatever I don't know. I'm not supposed to eat it. Do I sometimes eat it even though I'm not supposed to? Yes. If it was up to me, I would definitely have popcorn every time I went to the movies. But I do try to be good for my own health and avoid it when I can. Yeah, I used to love popcorn and still do, to be honest with you. And it's always better at the movie theater. Usually, maybe not always, but usually.
Yes, absolutely. So speaking of your daughter and the fact that you have young children, what do you recommend for the summer viewing? Is it from TV or streaming or film, for the children and their families to consume? And apparently, Cop and a Half, Roger Ebert notoriously endorsed it, much to Gene's chagrin.
He did. Yes. I don't think I would encourage my children to see it, but yes, that is true. Yes, when they reviewed that movie, Roger gave it a thumbs up. Now, it wasn't a rave review by any stretch of the imagination, but he gave it a positive thumbs up review. And Gene was flabbergasted. And the sort of the story that I was told that kind of connects with that is they reviewed the movie. Roger gave it a positive review. Gene was mortified. And if you watch it online, you'll see he's almost kind of angry. He's not just like horrified. He's a little annoyed that Roger has done this. This just seems like a violation of his sense of taste, if not morality. And so the story I was told by someone who worked on the show was the offices at the studio for the show had a wall of fame and like a tack board, and when someone would write into the show, if someone wrote a nice letter, a movie star, a director, sometimes would write something to the show saying, "Thank you so much for supporting my movie. It really means a lot. Signed so-and-so." And then they would stick it up on the board. And when you walked by, you could look and see who's written to the show. Well, as the story was told to me one day, not long after the Cop and a Half review, Roger Ebert was walking by the wall of fame in the office and said, "Oh, look at this." And he pulls off the wall of fame. There was a signed picture of the young man in Cop and a Half. Cop and a Half is a movie with Burt Reynolds and a child actor. And Burt Reynolds is like a gruff cop. And the child, I have seen this movie, but I don't remember the exact details. But somehow the cop becomes his partner. Wackiness ensues. And so I think Roger had praised the young child actor in the film. And so the child actor had written in, I think his name is Norman Golden, had written in, sent in like his headshot signed to Roger, "Thank you for saying such nice things about my movie. Norman Golden or something like that. And Roger sees it on the board and goes, oh, do you see this? Now look at this. This is nice. What a nice young man to do. This is lovely. And he's talking loudly and he's very happy. He's so, and from down the hall, Gene hears this happening and he comes out of whatever room he's in and he rushes over and he says, oh, did Norman send you a nice, yes, look at this, Gene. Look at what he sent me. And Gene says, does the signature look familiar to you at all, Roger? And Roger's looking at it, and Gene says, I wrote the letter. I signed the headshot. So he had sent it to the office or had tacked it up on the wall himself, hoping and waiting that eventually Roger would see it. And he got exactly what he wanted. He got to needle Roger one more time. But yes, I don't think I would have my children watch that one. Yeah, I don't know. There hasn't been a lot of great movies for kids lately in movie theaters. That's, as someone who does still like taking his kids to the theater, that's a struggle that I have lately, is that, once every 3 months, there might be something to see, and it can get a little frustrating. We watch a lot of stuff at home. I mean, my kids, my younger daughter, actually, I have two daughters. My younger daughter is very interested in music and performing in theater. So recently we were watching Gene Kelly movies. She was really into that. We were watching Summer Stock with Gene Kelly and Judy Garland. She loves Wizard of Oz. Her middle name is Dorothy. So she has an intense, reaction to Wizard of Oz as a result of that. But she was interested to see other Judy Garland things. This has Gene Kelly, who's a fabulous dancer. She was really impressed with Gene Kelly's dancing. She's like, whoa, like that. The movie itself, it's an old movie. It's kind of hokey in some ways, but the Gene Kelly dance numbers, they hold up pretty fabulously. And we've also seen Singing in the Rain. So yeah, if you have kids who like music, theater, performing, those old movies, those old MGM musicals, you might be surprised. They hold up pretty well. And this is like a 6-year-old who was into that. And we've been talking, and she's like, I want to see it. I told her about Gene Kelly. I told her about Fred Astaire. She's like, I want to see a Fred Astaire movie. So we haven't done that, but that'll be our next one. I got to figure out which would be the best one to show her. But at some point soon, we're gonna watch one of the Fred Astaire movies. That should be fun.
That's fantastic. Well, I just want to circle back on one final question about Siskel and Ebert, because we did talk about there was no official archive. Have you heard anything, as far as regarding the preservation of these old episodes of their shows?
I know that at some point, Chaz Ebert has talked about wanting there to be some sort of official Siskel and Ebert archive. I don't know if it's something she's actively working on right now. I don't know if it's planned. I just know that she has said publicly, I believe, that it's something that she would like there to be. And I certainly hope that there will be one. I mean, she has sort of done that, like Roger's website is kind of that for the print side of things. You can, not only do they still have new, current critics still reviewing movies every week, which is a wonderful thing to have. The website has just about every, newspaper piece that he ever wrote, reviews, features, interviews, essays, blog posts. It's like, it's all still there. So you can find almost anything on there, which is so wonderful. And unfortunately, it's a lot harder. Like I think we were saying earlier, like it can be harder to find some of Gene's older work. You can find some, but there isn't certainly like a one central, really easy to use archive like that, which again, I also wish there was. But I would hope that if we could have something like that for, the print side of Roger's career, I would really hope and love that there could be a really, official archive for Siskel and Ebert, especially, for some of like the earlier episodes, because, those can be harder to track down. They're not as many, the later episodes, pretty much every single one, with just a couple of exceptions, is available online. Some of the earlier years, those are harder to track down. And I would be really excited, just as a fan now, to be able to go and watch them in one place whenever I wanted. I still, even after the book, I still will put on Siskel and Ebert reviews to watch just for fun now. I still love the show, and spending years of my life writing about it certainly did not change that one iota. So I can't say how many people would be using this official Siskel and Ebert archive if it existed, but I know one person who would be using it constantly, and that would be me.
The book is Opposable Thumbs, How Siskel and Ebert Changed Movies Forever. And Matt, tell us where we can find the book.
You can find the book, pretty much anywhere the books are sold. You can get information at my website, which is matt-singer.net. It's a Putnam book, so that's part of Penguin Random House. If you go to the Penguin Random House website for the book, you can find links there to any website or brick and mortar retailer you might want to use. If you have a specific place you would like to buy it, you can find it there. So either of those places you can find it. Or as you mentioned, there's an audiobook, there's an ebook.
Well, Matt Singer, thank you so much for coming to the Women in Film podcast. We are just thrilled to have you, and good luck and all your success.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun. Thanks for talking to me.
Thank you for listening to Media and Monuments, a service of Women in Film and Video. Please remember to review, rate, and subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast. For more information about WIF, please visit our website at WIF as in Frank, V as in Victor.org. Media and Monuments is produced by Sandra Abrams, Candace Block, Brandon Ferry, and Tara Jabari, and edited by Candace Block and Inez Perez, with audio production and mix by Steve Lack Audio. For more information about our podcast, visit mediaandmonuments.com.